The arrow came out of nowhere. One moment, Garrett Walsh was riding through the canyon, leading a pack mule loaded with surveying equipment. The next, a perfectly aimed arrow had pierced the ground 2 inches from his horse's front hoof, causing the animal to rear and throw him hard to the rocky ground. Before he could reach for his rifle, he was surrounded by riders. But these weren't the Apache warriors he'd been warned about. Every single rider was a woman. They wore traditional Apache clothing and war paint, their long black hair braided for battle, their faces set with the cold determination of experienced fighters. But unmistakably, undeniably, they were all women. Young and old, some barely out of girlhood, and others clearly veterans of many conflicts. And all of them had weapons trained on Garrett with the calm competence of people who knew exactly how to use them. This was September of 1854, in a remote region of New Mexico Territory that wasn't on any official map. Garrett was 26 years old, a surveyor hired by the territorial government to map this region for future settlement. He'd been warned that Apache tribes controlled this area, but no one had mentioned anything about an all-female war party. The leader of the group rode forward. She was perhaps 40 years old, her face marked with ceremonial scars, her bearing suggesting absolute authority. She spoke in Apache, her tone making it clear this was a command, not a question. Garrett had picked up some Apache phrases from friendly traders, but not enough to understand complex sentences. He raised his hands slowly, showing he was unarmed and not resisting. "I don't understand," he said carefully in English. "I mean no harm. I'm just a surveyor." One of the younger women spoke up in accented English. "You are trespassing on sacred land, land where men are forbidden." She gestured around the canyon. "This is the Valley of the Moon, territory of the Izararai, the Star Women. No man has entered this place and lived in 3 generations." Garrett felt ice water run through his veins. He'd heard rumors, dismissed as frontier superstition, about a tribe of Apache women who'd separated from the main tribes decades ago. Stories said they killed any man who entered their territory. He'd assumed it was nonsense, the kind of tall tale told around campfires to frighten newcomers. Apparently, it wasn't nonsense at all. "I didn't know," Garrett said, keeping his voice steady despite his pounding heart. "I'm sorry, I'll leave immediately. Just point me toward the boundary, and I'll go." The leader spoke again in Apache. The younger woman translated. "There is no leaving. You have seen the valley. You know we exist. If we let you go, you will bring soldiers, bring settlers, bring the destruction that follows men everywhere they go. You will die here. The only question is how." Garrett's mind raced. He needed to buy time, needed to find some argument that would save his life. "Wait. If you kill me, my employers will send search parties. They'll bring exactly what you're afraid of, soldiers and settlers looking for answers. But if you let me live, if you let me leave with a story about dangerous terrain that's unsuitable for settlement, I can keep people away from here." The leader's expression didn't change. She spoke to her warriors in rapid Apache, clearly giving orders. Several women dismounted and moved toward Garrett. He tensed, expecting violence, but instead they bound his hands with leather cord and hauled him onto his horse. The leader said something else, and the younger translator spoke. "Nehelim, our war chief, says you will be brought to Queen Sitlali. She will decide your fate. If you are wise, you will pray to your God that she is merciful today." They rode deeper into the canyon, and with each mile Garrett saw more evidence of an established settlement. Terrace gardens growing corn and squash, adobe structures built into the canyon walls, children playing, all girls, watched over by older women. A complete functioning society, entirely female. Garrett's surveyor's mind cataloged details automatically despite his fear. Population maybe 200, well-defended position, access to water from a hidden spring, sustainable agriculture. This wasn't some temporary camp. This was a permanent community that had existed in secret for decades, possibly longer. They arrived at the heart of the settlement as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. A large adobe structure, more elaborate than the others, stood at the center. Guards flanked the entrance, all women, all armed. Garrett was pulled from his horse and marched inside. The interior was cool and dim, lit by oil lamps that cast dancing shadows on walls decorated with intricate paintings. At the far end of the room, on a raised platform covered in woven rugs and cushions, sat a woman who could only be Queen Sitlali. She was younger than Garrett expected, perhaps 35, with the kind of beauty that would have been legendary in any society. But it was her eyes that held him, dark and intelligent, missing nothing as they studied him with the intensity of a hawk evaluating prey. She spoke in perfect, unaccented English. Garrett Walsh, surveyor for the United States Territorial Government, born in Pennsylvania, educated in Philadelphia, employed for 14 months mapping regions designated for future settlement. You are unmarried, have no close family, and your employer expects you to return from this expedition in 3 weeks. Garrett's shock must have shown on his face because Sitlali smiled, though there was no warmth in it. You wonder how I know these things. We have scouts who move freely through white settlements. We know everything that happens in the territories surrounding our valley. We have to. Our survival depends on knowing what threats approach. She stood and walked down from the platform, moving with fluid grace. She circled Garrett slowly, studying him from every angle. You are the first man to enter the Valley of the Moon in 32 years. The last one was a Spanish soldier who stumbled upon us by accident. We killed him, of course, but that was different. He was a soldier, trained to be violent, programmed to conquer. You, she paused in front of him. You are something else, a man of books and maps and measurements, a man who builds with information rather than weapons. Interesting. What will you do with me? Garrett asked, trying to keep his voice steady. That depends, Sitlali said. She gestured to the guards. Release his bonds. If he intended to attack me, he would have tried by now. The leather cords were cut away. Garrett rubbed his wrists where they dug into skin. Sitlali walked back to her platform and sat, studying him. Tell me, surveyor, do you know why the Izra'i exist? Why a group of Apache women separated from their tribes and created this place? Garrett shook his head. I've only heard rumors, nothing specific. Then I will educate you, Sitlali said. 50 years ago, there was a raid on an Apache village by Mexican soldiers. They killed most of the men and took the women and children as slaves. My grandmother was one of those women. She was sold to a Spanish landowner who used her and the others as property, as objects for pleasure and labor. For 5 years they suffered. Then, one night, they revolted. They killed their captors and fled into the desert. Her voice remained steady, but Garrett could hear the steel beneath. But they couldn't return to their original tribes. They'd been dishonored, used by white men and Mexicans. Apache society would have shunned them or worse. So my grandmother led them here, to this valley that had always been considered sacred and forbidden. They made a new society, one where women would never again be vulnerable to men's violence, one where daughters could grow up free and strong. And men? Garrett asked. How do you... there are children here, girls. How does that work if no men are allowed? Sitlali's expression became carefully neutral. Twice a year, during specific ceremonies, we trade with neighboring Apache tribes who respect our boundaries. Young women who choose to can visit these tribes and return. Some come back pregnant. Those who give birth to sons give them to the neighboring tribes to raise. Only daughters stay here. It is our way. Garrett absorbed this, trying to understand a society so fundamentally different from anything he'd known. And I'm here because I accidentally violated your territory. You're going to kill me. That was Nehelim's recommendation, Sitlali agreed. She believes all men are potential threats and should be eliminated. But I'm not certain she's right. She leaned forward. You have skills that could be valuable to us. You can read and write English and Spanish. You understand maps and measurements. You've traveled widely and seen many things. These are resources we lack. You're offering me a choice? Garrett asked carefully. I'm considering offering you a choice, Sitlali corrected, but it comes with conditions that you may find unacceptable. Before Garrett could respond, Nehelim burst into the room, speaking rapid Apache to Sitlali. The queen's expression darkened. She responded sharply, clearly disagreeing with whatever Nehelim was saying. The argument escalated, both women's voices rising. Finally, Sitlali spoke a single word that silenced Nehelim. The war chief glared at Garrett with undisguised hatred, then turned and left. What was that about? Garrett asked. Sitlali sighed. Nehelim wants you executed immediately. She believes keeping you alive, even for a day, risks our security. She thinks I'm being weak, allowing emotion to cloud judgment. And are you? Garrett asked. Sitlali looked at him sharply. That's a bold question for a prisoner. You're considering letting me live. I'd like to understand why." The queen was silent for a long moment. "Because I'm tired," she said finally. "Tired of leading through fear and isolation. Tired of teaching our daughters that all men are monsters to be killed on sight. I've been queen for 12 years, and in that time I've kept us safe by maintaining absolute separation from the outside world. But the world is changing. More settlers come every year. The territories are filling up. Eventually, someone will find us, and when they do, we need to be more than just warriors hiding in a canyon." She met his eyes. "You could be valuable to us, not just for your skills, but as evidence that not all men are enemies, as proof that different ways of living together might be possible." Garrett felt his pulse quicken. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that you stay here, that you live among us, teach us what you know, and in return receive protection and a place in our society. But there would be rules, strict rules. You would live under constant supervision. You would have no weapons. You would never be alone with any woman except under specific circumstances. Any violation of our laws, any hint of violence or disrespect toward our women, and you would be executed immediately. Do you understand? If you're enjoying this story of an impossible choice in the Old West, hit that subscribe button, because what happens at sunset will change everything Garrett thought about his options. He could refuse and die, or he could accept and become part of something unprecedented, a man living in an all-female Apache society. "I understand," he said. "And I accept," Sitlali nodded slowly. "Then we will hold the ceremony at sunset. If you survive it, you will be bound to us. If you don't—" She trailed off. "What ceremony?" Garrett asked, feeling new fear creep in. "The choosing," Sitlali said. "It's how we determine if a man can be trusted. You'll understand when the time comes." The hours until sunset were the longest of Garrett's life. He was given food and water, allowed to wash, and provided with clean clothes. Apache clothing, he noted, not his own. They were preparing him for something, but no one would explain what. As the sun began to sink toward the western rim of the canyon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Garrett was led back to the central plaza. The entire tribe had gathered. 200 women and girls, all watching him with expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility to something that might have been hope. A ceremonial circle had been drawn in the dirt, marked with symbols Garrett didn't recognize. In the center stood a single wooden post. Garrett was led to the post, and his hands were bound behind it. Not tight enough to hurt, but secure enough that he couldn't escape. Sitlali appeared, now dressed in elaborate ceremonial clothing. She carried a staff decorated with feathers and stones that marked her as queen. She spoke to the assembled tribe in Apache, her voice carrying clearly across the plaza. The young translator from earlier approached Garrett and whispered the meaning. "The queen says this man has been given a choice, to die quickly or to face the choosing. He has chosen the choosing. Now we will see if he is worthy." Sitlali walked to the edge of the circle and began the ceremony. She called forward women one at a time. Each woman approached Garrett and performed some kind of test. The first woman, an older warrior, pressed a knife against his throat and stared into his eyes, looking for fear or aggression. Garrett kept his breathing steady, his expression calm, showing neither weakness nor threat. The woman nodded and stepped back. The next woman was younger. She slapped him hard across the face, clearly testing his reaction to violence from a woman. Garrett's cheek burned, but he didn't flinch, didn't show anger. He simply looked at her steadily until she nodded and moved away. Woman after woman came forward. Some tested him physically, others psychologically. They shouted insults, mimicked attacking him, even threw things. Through it all, Garrett remained calm. He'd realized what they were testing for. They wanted to see if he would react with violence, if he would show the aggression they'd learned to expect from men. After what felt like hours, only one person remained outside the circle. Nehalem, the war chief who'd wanted him dead from the start. She approached slowly, her hand on the knife at her belt. She stopped inches from Garrett's face and spoke in English. "You think you're special. You think you're different from the men who hurt our grandmothers? You're not. Given the chance, you would be just like them. I know this, and I will prove it." She drew her knife and in one swift motion cut a shallow line across Garrett's chest, not deep enough to be fatal, but deep enough to bleed, deep enough to hurt. Garrett gasped but didn't cry out. Nehalem watched his face, waiting for anger, for threats, for the violence she expected. Garrett took a breath and spoke carefully. You're right. I could be just like them. Any man could, but I'm choosing not to be. That's all any of us can do, choose who we want to be and prove it through our actions. Nehilim's eyes narrowed. Pretty words. Let's see if you still say them after a week here, or a month, or a year. Let's see if you can really be the man you claim to be. She stepped back and looked at Sitlali. He passed the tests, but I still don't trust him, and I never will. Sitlali approached Garrett and cut his bonds. Then we are in agreement. He has passed the choosing. He will live among us under the conditions I described, but Nehilim will be responsible for his supervision. If he betrays our trust, she has my permission to kill him immediately. Nehilim smiled coldly. I look forward to it. The tribe dispersed slowly, the ceremony complete. Garrett touched his bleeding chest and winced. Sitlali noticed. Come, I'll treat that wound. She led him to her quarters, the same room where they'd spoken earlier. Inside, she gathered medical supplies and gestured for him to sit. As she cleaned and bandaged the cut on his chest, she spoke quietly. You did well. Many men would have broken, would have shown anger or fear or aggression. You showed control. That's what we needed to see. Nehilim wants me dead, Garrett said. She'll be watching for any mistake. Yes, Sitlali agreed, which is why you'll make no mistakes. You'll follow every rule perfectly. You'll show respect to every woman in this tribe. You'll be the man you claim to be during the ceremony. Because if you're not, I won't be able to protect you. She finished bandaging his wound and sat back. You should know something else. The ceremony had a second purpose beyond testing you. It was also about me making a choice. What kind of choice? Garrett asked. Sitlali met his eyes. Among my people, when a man is allowed to live in our society, he must be bound to someone. A guardian who takes responsibility for his actions and his integration into our community. That person is usually a warrior or elder. But I've decided that person will be me. You will live here, in my quarters, under my direct supervision. You will answer to me for everything. And the tribe will understand that you are under my personal protection. Garrett felt his breath catch. Why would you do that? It puts a target on you, makes you look weak if I fail. It also gives me the opportunity to learn from you, Sitlali said, to understand how a man thinks, how he sees the world. That knowledge could be valuable for our future. And, she paused, and I'm curious about you, about whether it's possible for a man to truly live peacefully among strong women without needing to dominate or control. You're an experiment, Garrett Walsh. Don't fail me. The first weeks were difficult beyond anything Garrett had imagined. Every movement was watched, every word was analyzed. He lived under constant suspicion, with women waiting for him to reveal his true nature, to show the violence they expected. Nehilim was his most relentless observer, appearing at random moments to test him, challenge him, try to provoke the reaction that would justify killing him. But Garrett had been a surveyor for years, a profession that required infinite patience and attention to detail. He applied those same skills to navigating his new life. He learned Apache rapidly, studied their customs, offered his skills without demanding recognition. He taught reading and writing to those interested, showed them surveying techniques that could help manage their resources, and never once presumed to tell them how to live. Gradually, imperceptibly, attitudes began to shift. The younger women were curious about him, asked questions about the outside world. The elders appreciated his knowledge of herbs and medicine from his travels. Even some of the warriors, seeing his willingness to work hard without complaint, began to treat him with grudging respect, but it was his relationship with Sitlali that really changed. Living in close proximity, they had long conversations about everything: philosophy, politics, history, dreams for the future. Garrett learned that Sitlali had been chosen as queen at age 23 after her mother died, that she'd spent 12 years carrying the weight of 200 lives on her shoulders, that she was brilliant and lonely and desperate for her people to have a future beyond hiding in this canyon. And Sitlali learned that Garrett was different from the men she'd been taught to expect. He listened more than he spoke. He asked for permission rather than assuming he had the right to take. He genuinely respected her intelligence and authority. 3 months after the choosing ceremony, Sitlali made an announcement that shocked the tribe. She declared that Garrett would be given expanded privileges. He could move through the settlement without constant supervision. He could speak with women without a guard present. He was being trusted. Nehilim fronted Sitlali publicly. You're making a mistake. He's manipulating you, playing the role of the perfect man until you lower your guard, and then he'll show his true nature." "Perhaps," Sitlali said calmly. "Or perhaps he is showing his true nature and it's not what we expected. Either way, I've made my decision. If you disagree, challenge me for leadership." The statement silenced Nehalem. Challenging a queen meant combat to the death. Even Nehalem wasn't prepared to go that far. But her hostility toward Garrett intensified. 6 months into his time with the Izarare, crisis came from an unexpected direction. Raiders, not Apache, but renegade white men, discovered the valley and attacked. They'd been watching from the ridges, had seen the all-female settlement, and thought it would be easy prey. They were wrong. The Izarare were experienced warriors who'd defended their home before. But they were outnumbered this time. 20 raiders with modern rifles against a tribe of women with traditional weapons. The battle was brutal. Garrett watched from the central plaza, unarmed as always, feeling helpless as women he'd come to know and respect fought and died. Then he saw something that made his blood run cold. 3 raiders had broken through the defensive perimeter and were heading straight for Sitlali's quarters, where several children had been hidden for safety. Without thinking, Garrett ran. He had no weapons, no training in combat, but he couldn't stand by while children were murdered. He reached Sitlali's quarters just as the raiders broke down the door. He threw himself at the first man, using his size and surprise to knock him down. The second man turned his rifle toward Garrett but was struck down by Nehalem, who'd followed Garrett's run and realized what he was doing. Together, they fought the 3 raiders in close quarters. Garrett took a knife wound to his side but kept fighting, driven by pure desperation to protect the terrified children cowering in the corner. When it was over, when the raiders were dead or fled and the settlement was secure, Garrett collapsed from blood loss. He woke up 3 days later to find Sitlali sitting beside his bed, her face drawn with exhaustion and something else. Relief, maybe. "You almost died," she said quietly, "for children who aren't yours. In a settlement you were brought to as a prisoner." "Why?" "Because they needed protecting," Garrett said simply. "Because I couldn't stand by and do nothing. Because—" He struggled for words. "Because this is my home now. These are my people. How could I not fight for them?" Sitlali's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Nehalem was there. She saw what you did. She's finally admitted that maybe, possibly, you might not be planning to betray us. From her, that's practically a declaration of love." Garrett laughed weakly and immediately regretted it as pain shot through his wounded side. "I'll take it." "There's something else," Sitlali said. She took his hand, the first time she'd voluntarily touched him beyond medical necessity. "The council met. They've decided that you've proven yourself. You're no longer a prisoner or an experiment. You're a full member of the Izarare. You have a place here for as long as you choose to stay." "And how long do you want me to stay?" Garrett asked, meeting her eyes. Sitlali smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. "Forever, if you're willing. Because somewhere in the past 6 months, you stopped being an experiment and became something else. Something I didn't expect and don't entirely know how to handle." "What's that?" Garrett asked. "A partner," Sitlali said. "An equal, someone I trust, absolutely. Someone I—" She paused, clearly uncomfortable with vulnerability. "Someone I love. There, I said it. The queen of the Izarare, who swore never to love a man, loves a surveyor from Pennsylvania. Are you satisfied?" Garrett pulled her closer, ignoring the pain in his side. "Actually, yes. Because this surveyor from Pennsylvania has been in love with you since about week 2. And he's been terrified you'd notice and have him killed for inappropriate feelings." They kissed then, soft and careful, testing this new territory between them. When they pulled apart, Sitlali looked both happy and terrified. "This changes everything. The tribe, the traditions, everything we've built here. Or," Garrett offered, "it proves that the traditions can evolve, that strength doesn't require isolation. That maybe your grandmother's vision of women living free and strong can coexist with men who respect and support that vision rather than trying to control it." Sitlali considered this. "You understand this will be complicated, that many of our women will struggle with seeing their queen with a man, that we'll have to be careful and patient and probably fight this battle for years." "I'm a surveyor," Garrett said. "I specialize in patient, detailed work over long periods. I think I can handle it." Over the following year, Garrett and Sitlali's relationship became public knowledge. The reaction was mixed, as expected. Some women, especially the younger generation, were cautiously optimistic. Others, including some of the older warriors, were angry and betrayed. But Citlali navigated the politics with the same skill she'd used to lead the tribe for over a decade. She didn't demand acceptance. She let her actions speak. She continued to be a strong, effective leader. She continued to prioritize the tribe's safety and prosperity. And she demonstrated through daily example that loving Garrett hadn't weakened her, hadn't compromised her judgment, hadn't made her any less committed to the Izraelites' independence. Gradually, resistance softened. Nehilim remained skeptical but stopped openly opposing the relationship. The tribe adapted, as cultures do, finding new ways to incorporate this unprecedented situation into their worldview. 2 years after the choosing ceremony, Citlali and Garrett were married in a hybrid ceremony that honored both Apache and American traditions. It was a statement that different ways of life could coexist, could merge, could create something new without destroying what came before. They ruled the Izraelite together for 28 years. Garrett never tried to change the fundamental nature of the tribe, never pushed for male children to be allowed to stay, never questioned the core principles that had kept the women safe for 2 generations. But his presence, and later the presence of a few other carefully chosen men who followed his example, slowly transformed the tribe from a society of total separation to one of selective integration. When Citlali died at age 63, the Izarari was still a majority female society, still fiercely independent, but no longer completely isolated. They'd opened trade relations with nearby settlements, educated their daughters in both traditional Apache ways and modern skills, and proven that a society built on protecting women could evolve without losing its soul. Garrett lived another 8 years after Citlali's death, serving as an advisor to the new queen, but never seeking power for himself. When he died, he was buried beside Citlali with full honors, acknowledged as the man who'd helped bridge 2 worlds without destroying either. The story of the Izraeli and the surveyor who was captured and chosen became legend. But the real legacy wasn't the romance or the drama. It was the proof that societies built on fear and separation could transform into societies built on respect and chosen community, that men and women could coexist in ways that empowered both rather than requiring one to dominate the other, and that sometimes the greatest revolutions begin with a single choice made at sunset, because that's what happened on a September evening in 1854. A queen looked at a prisoner and chose to see possibility instead of threat. A man looked at an impossible situation and chose to respect rather than resist. And together, they proved that the walls we build to protect ourselves don't have to become the walls that trap us forever. Now, click on the video on the screen to hear another story of impossible transformations in the Old West, where one person's courage changed not just their own fate, but the future of an entire people.